you want a 1 gallon or you want a 5 gallon bucket. If they don't really, that's fine. Just there's plenty of beekeepers around, and a lot of them would be really excited to sell to a mead maker because there's some of us, but there's not a lot of us.
Well, not only that, but they know that if they sell to a mead maker, chances are extremely high that some of the mead will make it back to them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know
actually,
if I buy from a local beekeeper, I go back and go, look what I made.
Yeah.
I did that with the guy who gave me some. I did that with the guy who gave me some really lovely wildflower honey. But the problem is, my regular apiary, they're teetotalers. They don't drink.
Well, that does complicate things.
So that's a thing too. There's a lot of non-drinking beekeepers, and that's fine. It's like, okay, they don't drink alcohol. That's fine. I've gone to beekeepers meetings, and I was pouring mead, and I asked this one table, they're very nice, would you like some mead? And they're like, oh no, we don't drink alcohol. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm so dumb. They're from Utah. They're LDS. They were Mormon. It's totally fine. I mean, but I'm like, oh, I should have known that. I've lived out west, and like, oh, but they were very nice. So actually, some friends of mine who did not drink alcohol, they said, do you make an alcohol-free mead? Do you make one without alcohol? And I'm like, yes, I do. I call it honey-flavored soda, but I put honey in a keg and I carbonate it, and I made a ginger lemon that was quite a hit.
Hello?
But yes, it's called honey soda.
Oh, fun! David's here.
Yeah, I've made some sort of 0.5% honey soda by letting it, do the bottle fermentation or bottle carbonating. So just enough alcohol in it to have made enough carbonation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that actually counts as being alcoholic or not.
Yeah, it cracks me up when I hear people say, can you make a non-alcoholic mead? And it's like, why would you want to? And it's not really mead then.
Well, I can understand, because, I mean, I get about 3 drinks in, and then I get really sick. So I totally understand why you might want something that's either low or no alcohol. Or, I've got a Muslim friend who's really interested in tasting it, but you can't. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we have friends, and they have kids that come over, and, I mean, they want to try something also. And
that's where honey soda comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I say it's not mead, but
that's
it's
cool.
Good, yeah. It just doesn't have any alcohol.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it non-alcoholic mead, I just call it honey-flavored soda.
Exactly.
Honey soda's cool.
Yeah. David's here, but he doesn't speak up because he's like Mr. Shy Guy, so hi, David.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Hi.
So I think he's wanting to get more. He's a I don't know, how many hives do you have, David? 4?
4. Very much a novice.
Well, I tell you, I've been doing it for 36 years now, and I still learn new things every year. It's amazing how much there is to learn about bees, and I find, you can read every book and you can watch the YouTube videos and you can talk to whoever, expert, mentor, or whatnot. But the bees are going to teach you more than anything. Just being out there with the bees and being observant. I love my days that I'm out there and working with the bees because it's quiet. There's not really any cell phone coverage where I go, and even if it is, I leave the cell phone in the pickup truck. So, and bees actually don't like cell phones. They don't care about the cell phone waves, but the shiny part of the cell phone, so there's certain things that if bees get upset, they will instinctively attack. So anything that's dark or anything that's shiny. And if you imagine, what's their natural enemy? A bear. So how can they get the bear's attention? It's got thick
shiny
hair,
nose.
so they would go for the nose or the eyes. And so one time I was out in the bee yard, and they were totally fine, and somebody called me. I picked up the cell phone instinctively out of my pocket. I put it up to my ear, and all these bees just started attacking the cell phone, and so I just dropped it on the ground, and they ignored me. So I always leave my cell phone in the pickup truck. I don't even have it with me.
That's interesting. Good to know.
Yeah,
no cell
definitely.
phones around the bees. They wouldn't mind mine because it's dull and scratched, and in a case it's dull and scratched, so that's no shiny. There's nothing shiny about it.
Yeah.
Well, my 10-year-old flip phone doesn't really get a signal where my hives are, so I just leave it up at the house.
Yeah, if you don't get a signal, there's no point in carrying it.
Yeah.
And for someone who's starting out with bees, it's if you can find yourself a mentor or mentors, that can be really helpful because there's things that somebody can show you when they're looking at your hive, or when if you just even follow them along, that things that you can read about in a book, but it's really hard to get it unless you're there. When I sell queen bees to other beekeepers, I don't ship them. I just either meet them in the town, or you're in the Safeway, the grocery store parking lot, and they give you some money and you give them a brown paper bag. I mean, somebody might think I'm doing a drug deal out there in the parking lot or something, but it's like, no, I'm just trading some bees here. But I'll often have them come down to the bee farm, and to get their queen, and I say, well, just bring your bee suit. Come on, we can go. I'll be out there working this afternoon, and just when you show up, I'll show you some beehives, and I can show them more in a couple of hours than they could ever get from a book or something like that. And plus, I think it's really cool. It's like they're there to get a queen bee, and I pick her out of the beehive, and I put her in a cage, and I hand it to her. It's like picking out a puppy, the pick of the litter.
Wow.
Oh, here's my bee.
I could probably do that. I got my hives from actually my sales rep at the clinic, who happens to have 300 hives. And if I get a better bee suit than the disposable vinyl non-breeding one I have, probably ask them if I could spend a day with them or two.
Most beekeepers really like having somebody around. I mean, there's always this grumpy old curmudgeon beekeeper. I mean, there's always somebody like that. But most of us would love to show people our bees. And I had a swarm that a friend of mine told me about, and it was on the side of the pallet where the beehive was. So we went there and to go get the swarm, and we put the little box out for them to walk. It wants to reproduce. So in the spring, when there's too many bees in a hive, about half flies out, and they usually cluster on a tree or somewhere, and then they sit there for maybe a couple hours or a couple of days until they find a new place to live. Usually it's a hollow tree or a crack or in somebody's wall of somebody's house. And when they're clustered, they're actually in that swarm. They're actually very gentle. They don't have any honey to send. They don't have a hive. And so, I showed up and I said, "Oh yeah," and I just put my hand in the swarm, and the bees just kind of crawl on your hand. It's like, they don't sting you. It's like, no, they don't sting you, and unless you pinch one accidentally. And people see a cluster of bees like that. Most people would want to run the other way. They're like, "Oh my gosh, there's thousands of bees. What if they all sting me?" It's like, well, they don't.
Just don't make sense.
We just had one swarm in our grocery store parking lot on a shopping cart here this last spring.
It's funny, you can tell the beekeeper versus the non-beekeeper. The non-beekeepers are all running away, like getting into their cars and rolling up the windows, and the beekeepers are running towards the swarm and trying to see where it's clustered or where it's gone.
I just walked up to them and told the grocery store staff they might want to put some tape around it, because people kept trying to get that cart, and I said, if you get someone who's sensitive to stings, they may sue you.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly a nicer alternative than hitting it with the bomb,
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. If somebody leaves them alone, they'll eventually go and find their own.
Yeah, so you say they won't sting you, but aren't they like protecting the queen? What if you reach in and you grab the queen?
Well, I mean, if you squashed one, or you sat on one, or it accidentally flew and got in your hair, of course it would sting. But they're not, when they're in the swarm. And now a hive is different. I mean, they're protecting their home, and if they think they're under threat, then of course they'll come out and they'll warn you first usually, and then they'll sting. But a swarm, they have no hive to protect.
Well,
so
let's say you're an opportunistic beekeeper who wants to get that queen and put her in your hive.
Yeah.
Surely, would they then defend her if you decided to snag her? Like, would you need to be
No, you can pick her up. That swarm that I helped my friend catch the other day. What we did is I got a couple of handfuls of bees, literally with my bare hands, and I put them into that little hive, because they kind of need to know that there's a new hive for them. And once they realized that, they started releasing a scent, and it's called Nasamouth pheromone, but it smells like lemon, or like citronella, maybe is a good description of it. And they start fanning at the entrance, and that's basically their way of saying, hey guys, actually they're girls, hey girls, we've got our new hive, and you can come on in here. And then as more of them start walking in there, they all start doing their turn and fanning the scent. And so as they're walking in there, if you have good set of eyes, and you know what a queen bee looks like, and your hands are quick, you can reach down and pick her up. And so that's what I did with the queen. I marked her with a little drop of paint so that she'll be easier to find later on. But and the queen bees won't sting you. They only sting other queens when they're trying to fight, because there can only be one queen per hive. It kind of always reminded me like that show, the Highlander.
Yeah.
There can be only one.
But with queen bees. Yeah. Well, this one swarm was so interesting. Only half of it went in, and the other half kind of stayed clustered. And I even said out loud, I said, boy, it seems like there's a second queen in here. And sure enough, I kind of moved it around, and there was a second queen in that swarm. So sometimes the mother and the daughter will fly together, and then later the bees will sort it out. They'll either fight, or they'll, one of the queens will go away. But they will sometimes fly with more than one queen. You don't see that very often. So that was kind of cool. I got to see a swarm with 2 queens in it.
Wow.
So do you get 2 hives out of that?
They all went in.
Do you get 2 hives out of that, or did one of the queens bugger off?
You could. Yeah, actually, you could have done that. It was a very small swarm, so I left them as one so they can figure it out. But if it was a really big swarm, you could have probably put half the bees in one, and half, and you could have had 2 swarms out of that. Absolutely.
So then, what you squeezed one of the queens, or you just put both of them in the hive together?
I for that little tiny one, I just put them all in there, and the bees will sort it out. They'll decide which queen they want to keep. But if it was a really big swarm, I could have split them into two hives and had 2 of them out of it.
Crazy.
Very cool.
So, what? Going back to the things that they make with all the bees. You had mentioned way back at the beginning of this that you got your first hives when you were 13. Had you had mead at that point? I mean, was that something that your grandfather was into as well, or was that something that you had later?
That's something I had later. To my knowledge, I know my family made wine, but I don't think anybody made mead. But if they did, it would have been in Europe, and there's nobody alive anymore that remembers if they made mead or not. They knew they grew grapes and they made wine. I visited there when I was in my teens, and I wasn't a wine drinker at that time, but even then, some of the homemade wine was pretty awful. But you'd smile, and you don't want to offend anybody. Oh my gosh, offending somebody's honor. Oh yeah, it's really good. You want more? No, thank you. And they pour you more. But oh my gosh, if you ever said anything negative about somebody's wine, that would be like the greatest offense you could even think of. So you'd just kind of choke it down and smile. But no, I didn't have mead until I was an adult, and there wasn't a lot of mead. There was Chaucer's, I guess, and that wasn't really a lot of commercial mead. I had tried some homemade mead that was pretty good. I thought it was kind of sweet, but my first batch I made was totally bone dry, and then of course I added tannin and acid to it, which even screwed it up more. But I didn't know anything about that. I thought, you're a malt extract brewer. You thought, just mix it together and add the yeast. It's that simple, and of course it's not. So I became an all-grain brewer, and I made hard cider, I made wine, and then a number of years later, there was a fundraiser it was actually for the American Heart Association, and they always have a theme, and they decided to have a medieval Renaissance theme, and for the reception they normally would have like sparkling wine, and somebody said, well, we should have mead, and everybody's like, oh, that's a great idea, and I'm sitting there in the committee, and I'm like, well, where are you going to get the mead? And they're like, well, we don't know. And I'm like, I think I can help you out. So I made that mead after years of not making it, and it was a sparkling, semi-sweet orange blossom. It actually got a medal at Mazer. I can't remember. I think it was a third-place medal. But, I mean, for one of my meads that I hadn't made for years, and then I finally got back into it, it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But by then I knew about nutrient additions. I knew about, oxygenating the must. I knew about temperature control, and so I knew a lot more. I would think even if somebody wants to make only mead, I think it's a really great idea to learn how to brew beer and some other more forgiving beverages first.
I started with a wine kit.
Start out with a kit. It's totally fine.
Wine kit was.
I started with mead.
I did too.
I learned all the stupid stuff like how to rack and how to bottle.
Yeah,
I didn't have to worry about wrecking my meat doing it.
But there's the internet. They've got these forums and stuff, and people can. So if you want to start with mead and do only mead, you can read enough to learn how to do that. There wasn't any of that back then.
No, there wasn't.
So I didn't.
I learned.
There just wasn't.
I learned to make it through trial and error. There was a couple of books, most of them wrong. And you know, they were the ones that had you adding malic acid and tartaric acid and all of that at the beginning. You know, never mind that it might be totally out of balance later, but add that acid at the beginning was really important. And that was I had